What is going on, everybody? Hope everybody's enjoying their day so far. We are back with some more fantasy football content and another weekly live show. So, hope everybody is enjoying their day. We're going to be giving you the Week 16 fantasy starts and sits, as well as recapping what happened in Week 15 and the first round of the fantasy football playoffs. So, if you survived in advance from round one to round number two, congratulations. Hopefully, you were able to secure a W. If not, oh well, there is always next year. Hopefully you'll have a couple like either a top three or top five pick in your draft, and you're able to get it right next go round. But as always, here on the weekly show, we will kick things off with our studs and duds of Week 15, and then we'll look at some key news and injuries as we head into the new week of the NFL season. Then we'll dive into our Week 16 fantasy starts and sits. As I go through that, I'll also mention our waiver wire ads as well, because we do have some players that were also listed on the waiver wire ads video. So if you missed that, definitely go ahead and check that out. And then we'll also recap what happened in our own fantasy playoffs. We were in round number one. Like I mentioned, it was both week 14 and week 15. So round one has concluded. So we will see if we advance or if we will be moving down to the consolation bracket and, pretty much vying for third place in that fantasy football league. So let's go ahead and dive into our weekly studs and duds. Now, if you have any questions pertaining to starts and sits, go ahead and drop it in the chat. And as soon as I see it pop up on the screen, I will get to it and try to answer it as best as I can. So let's go ahead and start off the show with our quarterback stud of the week. And that's going to be Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. I definitely got this wrong. In last week's show, I had him as a sit, mainly because of the matchup against the Green Bay Packers. I mean, the Packers defense have really been playing well through this duration of stretch here. Ever since week 8, they've given up like one of the least points to opposing quarterbacks. But Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos continue to be one of the best in the AFC. This is definitely going to be a team that is definitely going to be hard to beat, especially if they have home field advantage throughout the entire playoffs. But Bo Nix, if you start him, hopefully you did, and probably have faded my picks there. But he did finish with 302 passing yards, did have 4 passing touchdowns in that game as well. Not as much as rushing volume that he usually gets, especially that we saw in his rookie season. But 7 rushing attempts, 10 yards. So the rushing volume is definitely there for Bo Nix to have game in and game out. He did finish with 29.08 fantasy points. So honestly, that's not that bad of an outing. Like, we've seen Bo Nix put up like even 40 points, believe in that game against the New York Giants. And then he had some dud games throughout this season. But Bo Nix so far this season has been a top 10 fantasy football quarterback. So I know I drafted him in pretty much every single league. It has worked out in 2 or the 3 leagues. One of my leagues, I didn't end up make the playoffs, but that was more than Bo Nix. But Bo Nix, what a start it was in the Denver Broncos win this past Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. So that he earns our stud of the week. Now let's move on to our RB stud. And I got to give credit to a lot of the RBs and wide receivers because there was a lot of them that put up a ton of points, like James Cook had himself a game. Saquon Barkley also had a really good game. But we're going to give it to Travion Henderson, even in the loss of the New England Patriots. He had 14 rushing attempts, 148 yards, 2 of those coming on 2 long touchdowns. So he did have 2 touchdowns in the game, 2 receptions, 13 yards. So if you do play in PPR formats, he did get some added points there. And he did finish with 33.1 fantasy points. And I know Travion Henderson is definitely going to be one of the stories of the season, especially at the running back position. I think that a lot of people are very high on him. Coming out of the preseason, thinking that he was just going to be this bell cow RB1 for the Patriots. It ended up being Ramondre Stevenson. But Travion Henderson, as of late, has really taken over this backfield, and he's definitely a must-start throughout the rest of the season. Even though that the Patriots do have some tough games coming up, I do think that you are going to ride with Travion Henderson for the rest of the playoffs. Now let's move on to our wide receiver studs. Like I mentioned with the running back, I mean, I could have gone so many different directions. Like Michael Wilson had a good game. A.J. Brown continues to be dominant. DK Metcalf got a touchdown on Monday night's game against the Miami Dolphins. But I ended up going with a guy that has honestly been the guy that I've been pretty much drafting every single year, and that's Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. He's honestly my favorite wide receiver in the entire league. 13 receptions, 164 yards. He did have, I believe, 18 targets in that game, which is just insane. We did see Jamar Chase break the record with 21 receptions just a couple of weeks ago. So the first round wide receivers outside of Justin Jefferson has really been playing well. CeeDee Lamb, I know, got injured, but overall his season has been well. Jamar Chase, I know about Joe Burrow. He had some weeks with Joe Flacco as a quarterback where he wasn't putting up wide receiver one numbers. But Amon-Ra St. Brown has quietly been like one of the best picks looking back to the first round. He has been just a consistency, especially in PPR formats. So he did finish with 164 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and he had like around 30 fantasy points going into the half. So honestly, if he got like one more touchdown, it would have been a 50 burger. But 41.4 fantasy points, you will definitely take that, especially in the fantasy playoffs. So hopefully, if you did have Amon-Ra, you start him and you were able to advance to round number 2. But Amon-Ra St. Brown honestly just may earn the wide receiver stud of the year. We will definitely have that at the end here, go through our studs of the year and our duds of the year and look back at what went wrong maybe in round number 1. We'll do a little season recap before we try to look ahead to the 2026 season. But for week 15, Amon-Ra St. Brown is our stud of the week. Now let's go on to our tight end stud, and Kyle Pitts earns our tight end stud back-to-back weeks. What a performance it was for the Falcons. They were able to come away with a victory on Thursday night. And your week started off well if you did start Kyle Pitts in your fantasy matchups this past week. 11 receptions, 166 yards, and 3 touchdowns. 45.6 fantasy points. I don't even think Kyle Pitts has scored that many points in his entire career with the Falcons. But definitely a performance. I did not have him on my starts. I thought I did. Hopefully, I think I mentioned him as a potential start last week, just talking about Kyle Pitts or tight end stud. To be honest with you, you're going to be starting him the rest of the season. I mean, he's probably not going to give you 45 fantasy points, but if he can give you like 7 to 10 receptions with 80 to 90 receiving yards and a touchdown, you would definitely take that every single week. But especially with no Drake London, Kyle Pitts might just be Kirk Cousins' favorite target, especially when the Falcons get inside of the 20. So Kyle Pitts is our tight end stud. So that's our studs of the week. Now let's go ahead and go to the opposite side of it. We're going to go to the quarterback dud of the week. That's going to be Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. Overall, disappointing season for the Bengals, and they got shut out this past week in a crucial matchup, at least on one side for the Baltimore Ravens to stay in the division race with the Steelers. But Burrow, 225 passing yards, 2 interceptions, one of them being a pick 6, only 7.5 fantasy points. I definitely think injuries derailed Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's season. It's what if would have happened if he didn't get injured so early in the season. But Joe Burrow, looking to 2026, this is still a quarterback that I'm drafting. Looking at the weapons with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase Brown's going to continue to improve year in and year out here in the NFL. So Joe Burrow, I think rest of the season wise, you can still start him just based on potential matchups. But there are some quarterbacks that you can get on the waiver wire and stream this week. Now let's move on to our next running back dud. That's going to be Quinshon Judkins of the Cleveland Browns. Only 12 rushing attempts for 21 yards, 3 receptions, -4 yards in the Browns' loss to the Chicago Bears. 4.7 fantasy points. And this is back-to-back disappointing outings for Quinshon Judkins. I don't know if that's the overall offense of the Browns have been these past couple of weeks, but he does have a nice matchup against the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, if you are going to get him, is going to be against the rush. Just look at what Trayvon Henderson was able to do. I do expect a bounce back against Quinshon Judkins. If not, then maybe you just need to bench Quinshon Judkins heading into the championship Sunday. But we will definitely monitor that in Week 16. But I would still feel confident in starting Judkins against the Buffalo Bills rush defense that hasn't been all that great this season. Now let's move on to our wide receiver dud. This is definitely going to be the wide receiver dud of the season right here. Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. 2 catches, 22 yards, 4.2 fantasy points. I really thought that this was going to be the game that we really saw Justin Jefferson that we've had in the past couple of seasons. Going up against the Dallas Cowboys defense, who've given up the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and the way that J.J. McCarthy was able to perform on Sunday night against the Dallas Cowboys. Minnesota put up over 30 points in that game, and you really didn't see much of Justin Jefferson. I mean, Jordan Addison had like 2 catches for 66 yards, so he had 2 big catches. But Justin Jefferson overall this season has definitely been a disappointment. We are definitely going to look in the microscope of his 2025 season and look forward to 2026 to see what his outlook is. And even if he's still a round 1 pick heading into the 2026 campaign, that's definitely going to be a question that we will have to answer in the offseason. Now let's move on to our tight end dud. We're going to stay in that same matchup. Go to the opposite side, though. Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys, only 2 catches for 16 yards, 3.6 fantasy points. Now, I think that Jake Ferguson overall season has been really good. It's just whenever CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens came back, especially when CeeDee Lamb came off with an injury, you had Jake Ferguson have like back-to-back blowout week games. But with CeeDee Lamb back in the lineup, Jake Ferguson is just not really getting looked at anymore. It was a tough matchup against the Vikings. The Vikings have really been solid against opposing tight ends, but really a lowly stat line for Jake Ferguson as he finished this game with 2 catches and 16 yards in the Cowboys' loss. And that loss is definitely going to be detrimental to the Cowboys' postseason hopes as they are now definitely out of reach, I believe, with the 49ers being in firm control of a postseason spot as well as the Packers. We will see if the Lions can catch up, but it looks like that loss to the Vikings have pretty much eliminated the Dallas Cowboys from the postseason. All right, so that is our studs and duds of the week. Let's go ahead and move on to some news and injuries heading into Week 16 because we did have some key injuries, especially on both sides of the ball. The first main one is Patrick Mahomes tearing his ACL. He'll be out for the remainder of the season, and it's definitely going to be of note of how if he's going to miss any time heading into next season because the injury happened in the second weekend of December, and this season's going to be starting in early September. So it's definitely going to be interesting what the timeline's going to be for his recovery and when he'll be able to return to full-time activities. So that's definitely going to be something to monitor, like the whole entire Chiefs offense, like the Travis Kelce's, if he does come back and doesn't retire, Rashee Rice, Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, all those guys will potentially be affected by their ADPs if we do have an absence of Patrick Mahomes at the start of the season. On the opposite side of the ball, another torn ACL injury, this time Micah Parsons of the Green Bay Packers. A tough loss for the Packers defense have been playing really well throughout this season. So those are the 2 main key injuries that we had. We did have some more big news coming out of Miami. Quarterback change is happening for the Dolphins. Tua is getting benched. Quinn Ewers, the rookie of Texas, will be starting against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now the matchup, if you do honestly need a streamer in a deeper league, Quinn Ewers would definitely be a streaming candidate against the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Have definitely been terrible for the majority of this season. But if I was in like a 10 or a 12-man league, I think there's some options. If you're in like a 20-man league or more than that, Quinn Ewers could definitely be an option for you. Let's move on down to some next ones. We do have some Seahawks injuries with that game coming tomorrow night against the Rams. Left tackle Charles Cross will be out, and Jamal Adams is doubtful for the Thursday night game against the Los Angeles Rams. Jets Brady Cook will stay quarterback 1 even with vets on the way back. So Brady Cook will once again get the start. He was able to get his first NFL career start. Really, the only Jets that I'm starting on this offense is A.D. Mitchell and Breece Hall. Really, outside of that, I just don't really trust anyone, even with a nice matchup against New Orleans Saints, though the Saints defense have really been playing solid these past couple of weeks. So nobody is really catching my eye on this Jets offense to really be a star. But if you do need to start anyone on this offense, it would be Breece Hall and A.D. Mitchell. Now let's go on to some more injury news to the Saints side. So we just talked about the Jets. Now let's talk about their opponent in the Saints. The Saints have ruled out both Devin Neal and Devon Vele out Sunday. So I guess Mason Tipton will be the wide receiver 2. Chris Olave will still be the wide receiver 1. Am I starting Mason Tipton? I'm probably not. Juwan Johnson's also a name that you could also start in this matchup if you do need a tight end streamer. But running back position, Audric Estime, he was able to get some key receptions in that game against the Carolina Panthers this past Sunday. So Audric Estime definitely a startable candidate this week against the Jets rush defense that have been god-awful this season. Let's see if there's any more news that we need to get into. I definitely wanted to start off with both the Micah Parsons and the Patrick Mahomes injuries. Had some tough injuries to both of those players, but there's some key injuries in between, like I mentioned, with both the Saints and the Jets in that matchup. We do have some more news on the Thursday night game, this time on the Rams side. Rams are listing wide receiver Davante Adams as doubtful for Thursday night's game in Seattle due to his hamstring injury. So obviously you're starting Puka Nacua. I mean, Puka Nacua is just going to get all the receptions down. But Colby Parkinson, the tight end, definitely a must-start tight end, especially with Davante Adams. I expect him to be like the quote-unquote wide receiver 2 in that matchup. We'll see, if we do have any more wide receivers, get some more catches in that one. Broncos wide receiver Courtland Sutton said Wednesday he and Jaguars. I guess never mind. This is not really any news that we need to get into. I thought that was some injury news, but looks like that is about it. We did have some college news. If you do play Dynasty fantasy football, Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame, he is declaring for the NFL draft. So that's some big news if you do play in Dynasty leagues. And if you're looking to draft Jeremiah Love this week. Some kicker news. The New York Giants away kicker Young-Ho Koo. And then some more news coming out of the Cardinals. The Cardinals have officially placed running back Bam Knight on injured reserve. Ending his season, Knight suffered an ankle injury in the Cardinals' 40-20 loss to the Texans on Sunday. So like I mentioned on our waiver wire video, if you do need a running back this week, Michael Carter would be the top option for me, as well as Blake Corum, especially Davante Adams. I think that the Rams are definitely going to run the football with both Kyren Williams and Blake Corum on Thursday. But that's some big injury news coming out of Arizona. We do have some more news. Head coach Shan Steichen told reporters that Philip Rivers will start again next Monday night against the San Francisco 49ers. And I believe that's all so let's see. Yep, now we're caught up. Looks like I'm all the way back. So we are all caught up to our news and injuries heading into week 16. So definitely some key injuries that you need to look at, especially at the quarterback position. Phil Rivers is getting the start. Quinn Ewers is getting the start. Looks like Brady Cook once again is getting the start. And Patrick Mahomes out for the majority of the year. Same with Bam Knight. And some key injuries for the Saints. Devin Neal and Devon Vele both out for Sunday's game against the Jets. So we are all caught up. Now we can shift our gears into our Week 16 fantasy starts and sits. So as always here on the program, we give you 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, as well as 2 tight ends. And then for the sits, we will give you 1 of each. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our Week 16 fantasy starts of the week, starting with our quarterback, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. Now, first off, let's go ahead and look at the matchup as we always do. Going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, this defense have allowed 19-plus points to 7 quarterbacks this season. And this offense for the Detroit Lions, even in their recent losses, most recently to the Los Angeles Rams, this Lions offense has really been cooking. I mean, Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown combined for 70 fantasy points. Jahmyr Gibbs coming off of a dud game. I expect him to bounce back against the Steelers defense. So this could honestly be a back-and-forth battle. I know that the Steelers offense have really been playing well. I know they looked okay against Monday night against the Miami Dolphins, but that Dolphins defense continues to play better as the weeks goes on. So Jared Goff is definitely a plug-and-play option for your starting lineups. Now let's move on to our next quarterback start of the week. That's going to be Jacoby Brissett of the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals got a nice matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. This Falcons defense have allowed the 8th most points to quarterbacks since week 8 of the season. And Jacoby Brissett, even when the Cardinals are trailing in what's been pretty much every single game that he's been the starter, Brissett has been able to finish with 20-plus fantasy points. Even in the tough game that he had against the Houston Texans, he was one of the few fantasy quarterbacks to score over 20-plus points. So I'm starting Jacoby Brissett, even with the injuries. We'll see if we do have Marvin Harrison Jr. back in this offense. But even if Harrison Jr. doesn't play, I mean, Michael Wilson has really been a stud for that Cardinals offense. And then with the injury that we have to Bam Knight, Michael Carter is going to step in as the RB1. So this offense hasn't been that bad. It's just been the defense hasn't been able to stop anybody. But Jacoby Brissett definitely has been Mr. Consistency the past couple of weeks. So I'm definitely giving him a nod to get into my starting lineups in Week 16. Now let's move on to our running backs. The first running back that we're going to look at is Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a big matchup for both of these teams. This will be the first of two matchups in the next couple of weeks. And probably the winner of both of those games will be the decider of who wins the NFC South here, which is pretty much going to be a two-team race here. But the Panthers have allowed the ninth most points to the running backs. Devin Neal was able to score a touchdown. You did see Audric Estime get a couple of catches and key runs down the stretch in that game. But Bucky Irving, coming off of an injury, has been decent. I'm not going to say he's been like the best fantasy running back, coming back from the injury. But this Tampa Bay offense really needs to get it going. There's been definitely a lot of struggles. They had a 14-point lead on Thursday night, ended up blowing that on Thursday against the Falcons. So I really expect Tampa Bay, even on the road going to Carolina, I do expect this offense to really bounce back. Look for Mike Evans to have a big game and Bucky Irving also to have a big game out of the backfield. He is projected to score 15.1 fantasy points in PPR format, so we will see if he can get a couple of catches as well out of the backfield. But this is a nice matchup going up against the Panthers defense that have definitely been prone to letting up a lot of points to opposing running backs. Now let's go on to our next running back, Aaron Jones of the Minnesota Vikings. It feels like we've had both running backs at the start of the week here throughout the season with Jordan Mason and now Aaron Jones. This is about as good a matchup as you're going to get going up against the New York Giants, who have allowed the second most points to the running back position. And we just saw JCM have a nice performance with Chris Rodriguez being out with a groin injury. So JCM could do it. I mean, I definitely think that Aaron Jones could also have a nice game against this New York Giants team that really struggled in Week 15 against the Washington Commanders with Marcus Mariota. So Aaron Jones, if you have him on your waiver wire right now, definitely go pick him up, plug him in, and play him into your flex spot. I do expect this to be a classic Aaron Jones game where he scores, 1 or 2 rushing touchdown and get well over that projection of 11.6 points in PPR. Now let's move on to our next segment, going into our wide receiver starts of the week. First up is Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals. And if you don't have Marvin Harrison Jr., I mean, Michael Wilson, definitely a lock to be in your starting lineups, especially with how good the matchup has been. The Atlanta Falcons have allowed the most touchdowns to wide receivers since Week 8. So if you want a good bet, Michael Wilson finding the end zone is about as good of a bet as you're going to get. So Michael Wilson, I know he had a slow start against the Houston Texans. I mean, he was going at the half with like 2 or 3 fantasy points. And he had a couple of catches. He had a touchdown. So he really poured it on the second half to really save his day in the toughest matchup that you're probably going to get outside of going up against the Seattle Seahawks. So the matchup does line up there. But really the production between Michael Wilson and Jacoby Brissett has really been off the charts. So I'm once again starting Michael Wilson this week. We're also starting DK Metcalf, the wide receiver 1 of the Pittsburgh Steelers. There are not too many other options on this Steelers offense. This is a nice matchup. Once again, going up against the Detroit Lions. The Lions defense haven't been that great defending opposing wide receivers in this 2025 campaign. The Lions have allowed 12-plus points to 17 wide receivers. And DK Metcalf, coming off of a solid performance on Monday night, did have a couple of catches, had that touchdown to get him to 15 fantasy points in PPR format. So wouldn't be shocked at all if he does find the end zone, because somebody's going to have to find the end zone if they do want to stay in this game, because it feels like the Lions offense is probably going to get into the high 20s, maybe even low 30s in this game. So I am starting DK Metcalf either as my wide receiver 2 or in one of my flex spots this week. So that's our wide receiver starts. Now let's move on to our next pass catchers. That's going to be the tight ends. And Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles, coming off of a monster performance. I know we talked heavily about Kyle Pitts in our tight end recaps. But Dallas Goedert had 2 touchdowns, over 25 fantasy points in the Eagles shutout win against the Raiders on Sunday afternoon. Really nice matchup once again going up against the Washington Commanders. This Commanders defense overall have allowed 9+ points to 12 tight ends this season. So Dallas Goedert has really been feasting in this offense the past couple of weeks. You've seen A.J. Brown really step up. You've seen Devontae Smith kind of cool off. I really expect, this Eagles offense to really pour it on the Washington Commanders. And this one is probably going to be a runaway. So I expect Dallas Goedert probably not to. We'll see if he has that big of a blow up. He has like those type of games every so often. So we will have to see. But overall, I just think that the production and the way that this offense has been able to generate some points against these bad defenses, I am definitely starting up Dallas Goedert this week. Now let's go to our last tight end start of the week. That's going to be Colby Parkinson of the Los Angeles Rams. Now he does get the start tomorrow night against the Seattle Seahawks. So we just got some news that Devontae Adams is doubtful. So Colby Parkinson is honestly like an auto lock of the week. He was in my waiver wire ad video on yesterday's that we put out. But I know that a lot of people are going to say, well, he's going up against the Seattle Seahawks, who are the number 1 fantasy defense. But if you are going to get some yardage against the Seahawks, it's going to be the tight ends. And Parkinson has really been a machine. He scored 12+ fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 games. I expect that stretch to continue. Wouldn't be shocked at all if he does score a touchdown. He did score 2 touchdowns in the Rams' victory over the Lions. So this is a tough defense. However, Colby Parkinson is going to be like the number 2 pass catcher in this offense. We do have a question coming in, so let's go ahead and answer it here. Are we playing London if he plays? Same injury as Bowers and Ricky, and both came back being garbage. Also, Chiefs defense or Saints defense this week? I think that either defense is fine. The Saints defense is going up against a rookie. Chiefs defense going up against a Titans. So I guess you could also say of a rookie as well. I'm actually going to go with the Saints defense this week. I really like their matchup, especially with Brady Cook going on the road to a hostile environment. And this Saints defense has really picked it up these past couple of weeks. And if London does play, honestly, you do have to start him, especially with how thin the wide receiver position is for the Falcons. You just got to trust Drake London to put up at least 10+ points. So if he does play, I would definitely start him, especially with the matchup that the Falcons have on Sunday. Let's continue on here. Assuming I start Javonte and Barkley at my running backs. Am I crazy for benching Kyron due to Corum 50 work and hard matchup? Honestly, wouldn't be opposed to benching Kyron this week, especially like you mentioned with Blake Corum getting most of the production with him, especially going up against the Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks defense have really been phenomenal against the rush, so I'll continue on there. Need to start 2 of Kyron, Hampton, Vidal, Carter, Sutton, and Terry. I'm definitely starting Courtland Sutton. That man has just been like consistently putting up some numbers. I'm also putting up Michael Carter. So if I have all those players that you mentioned, let's go ahead and start Michael Carter and Courtland Sutton. Let's continue on there. Start 1, Jalen Warren, 67-year-old quarterback, but good matchup. Waller, no Tua. Loveland and no Komet, Burden and Rome, or Schultz already start Nico, but opponent has CJ, so I can double block him. To be honest with you, even with no Tua, Waller's matchup is about as good as you're going to get. The Cincinnati Bengals have allowed the most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So I honestly, out of all these, I know with no Tua, Tua is not even that great of a quarterback, to be honest with you. I think that Quinn Ewers could definitely even get more production too. But I'm going to go with Darren Waller. Schultz does have a nice matchup too. So if you're kind of on the fence, Schultz would be my number 2 option. Tyler Warren has a tough matchup against San Francisco. Colson Loveland too. So of all those 2, I would start Darren Waller would be my number 1. Dalton Schultz would be my number 2. But if I had to give you an option, it would be Darren Waller going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's continue on there. Start 5, 2 running backs, 1 wide receiver, 2 flex. Rico, Hampton, Vidal, Pollard, Kamara if he plays. Kamara, I don't think he's playing, so it looks like Audric Estime is going to get the start. Tedero McMillan, Wan'Dale Robinson, Shakir, and Burden. So I'm definitely starting Rico Dowdle. I definitely think that Rico Dowdle, you got a touchdown this past week. This is a nice matchup. I mean, look at what Bijan was able to do. So Rico is definitely a start for me. Wan'Dale Robinson has a really tough matchup against the Vikings, so I'm benching him. I would go with the two Panthers of Rico and Tet. Definitely would go with Luther Burden. Luther Burden has really stepped in as being the wide receiver one for that offense. Tony Pollard has really been hot, so let's go ahead and ride with the hot hand of Tony Pollard. And to wrap it up, let's go with Khalil Shakir and hope that we get a touchdown or a big play from him. I'm just going to go with the best offense overall out of this list. So let's start Rico, Tony Pollard, Luther Burden, Khalil Shakir, and Tet McMillan this week. Let's go ahead and go to our next question. Who are the top three quarterbacks in order to start this week? Joe Burrow, Jacoby Brissett, Bo Nix, Trevor Lawrence, Darnold, Caleb, or Rodgers. I definitely think my top two this week would have to be Trevor Lawrence and Bo Nix. I don't think I'm going to be starting Sam Darnold. The Rams defense is really tough. I think I'm going to go with the top three being Bo Nix, number one, Trevor Lawrence is two, Jacoby Brissett would be my number three. Other quarterbacks have really been up and down this season. I can't really trust them, especially in the fantasy playoffs. So Bo Nix, Trevor Lawrence, and Jacoby Brissett would be my top three. So I appreciate your questions. Hopefully I was able to answer all of that. If you do have any more questions, feel free to drop some in the chat, and we will get to it as soon as possible. So that's our starts of the week. Now let's go on to our sits of the week. And we're going to start off with Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Dak Prescott has had his really good games at times, and this past week was not one of them. This is a very tough matchup going up against the Los Angeles Chargers defense that have really been playing well this past couple of weeks. This is a defense that have allowed the fewest points to the quarterback since week 8. So if you're looking for a quarterback that's going to give you 15-plus points, I don't think that Dak Prescott's going to be one of those quarterbacks this week. So like I mentioned, Jacoby Brissett's a better option, Trevor Lawrence. Those would be two quarterbacks I would rather start over Dak Prescott for the week. Now let's move on to our next running back start. That's sit of the week, excuse me. It's going to be Ashton Jeanty of the Las Vegas Raiders. And my gosh, not only have the Raiders been bad, but Ashton Jeanty has definitely really not had the past couple of weeks have really been bad. Brock Bowers has had his good games, but who are you starting in this Raiders offense? I wouldn't start anybody because look at the matchup. Houston Texans have allowed just 3.7 yards per rush, and nobody's really had success overall. Whether you're a wide receiver or quarterback, it doesn't matter. The Houston Texans are one of the best defenses in fantasy football, and you can be Christian McCaffrey. I probably still would bench a guy like that. But Ashton Jeanty has just definitely been a disappointment the past couple of weeks. The offense have been terrible. I'd rather just get another running back to start this week. Now let's move on to our next wide receiver, Deebo Samuel of the Commanders. Tough matchup once again going up against the Eagles, who have allowed the fewest points to the wide receiver position since week number 8. There's not really many wide receivers that I'm starting overall. I am still starting Jacory Crosby-Merritt because the Eagles' secondary is very tough against opposing wide receivers. However, if you are going to get some fantasy points, it is going to come out the running back. So JCN would definitely be a start if we do not see Chris Rodriguez come back from injury. Now let's move on to our last sit. That's going to be Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. Looking at the matchup, it isn't that bad, but against the tight ends, it is definitely difficult for Hunter Henry to get 15-plus fantasy points that we're looking for every single week. Going up against the Baltimore Ravens, this Ravens defense have only allowed 3 tight ends to score more than 9.9 points. Hunter Henry is on a nice offense. Drake May is in MVP contention right along there with Matthew Stafford. However, this is just a very tough matchup. I'd rather have other tight ends like even Jawan Johnson, Darren Waller, and even Harold Fannin. There is some other tight ends that you could definitely start. Obviously, if you don't have anybody else, you are starting Hunter Henry. But if you do have a plan B, I would definitely use it because it's definitely a difficult matchup, especially for Hunter Henry this week. So that's our Week 16 fantasy starts and sits of the week. Now let's go ahead and dive into how our team did in week number 1. And unfortunately, our season, I guess our season's still going on. We had to fight for third place, but we did get bounced from the first round, which was a very long first round. It was 2 weeks. This is how most ESPN leagues do it. But the Birds, he's 11-2 for a reason. Honestly, like we played it about as good as we could. 325.44 to 267.26 was the final score in this one. Our championship run will end here. But looking at overall, I mean, quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, what a pull that was. I mean, a nice start going up against the New York Jets, put up 44.3 fantasy points. Drake May on his side put up 20.5 and the loss to the Bills. Looking at the running backs, our two running backs once again put up some points. Saquon had 17, Chase Brown had 16. However, his two running backs pretty much outbid ours, as JT had 13. James Cook once again continues to be one of the more consistent running backs that you can find in fantasy this season with 31. Look at the wide receivers. Emeka Egbuka had 10, but overall he's really been falling off here. But JSN with 18. Puka had 27 for him. George Pickens had 6. So we were able, honestly, to survive that. Not that big of a game for Pickens. However, when you have Kyle Pitts scoring 45, you are more than likely going to win every single week. We only had 4 points from our tight end, Tyler Warren. I forgot to check my lineup. I'll be honest with you. I did not put out Chris Rodriguez. I don't think it would have mattered anyway. He put up 0. Woody Marks had 10. Texans defense had 6. Our defense also had 6, so we matched our defense. Kickers were about even. Brandon had 14. Chase McLaughlin had 11. So overall, our week 15 total was 128. But he had 175. But, I mean, we did beat our projections at 107. So one of our higher scoring weeks of the season. But, I mean, when your opponent puts out 175, that is definitely difficult to beat. So congratulations to the Birds. He moves on. Let's move to our next matchup. That is our other winners bracket. And I wish we were in this one because we would have beat both of these teams, as Mushrooms only put up 139 and Ben's best team put 242. So looking at the overall bracket, let me go ahead and pull up the overall bracket here if I can. Let me go to, I guess, League Home. Let's see here. Let me go to Fantasy. Where is this? The bracket. Come on. Let me try to go to Scoreboard. I think it's under Scoreboard. There we go. Let me go to the playoff bracket. So looking at the updated playoff bracket, we will be now in the third place game. So the 4 versus 3 will be going up against Mushrooms, Ben's best team, and the Birds. So pretty chalk in the winners bracket in this league. Number 1 versus number 2 seed. I think I would bet every dollar I got that the Birds will be winning this league because his team was very dominant. His running backs were JT, and James Cook. I mean, he has Kyle Pitts putting up 45 points. So overall, I'm not, obviously, would you like to win a championship? Yes. But I think overall this season, we went 8-5 in the regular season. We lost to the best team overall. He put up 325 on us. Really nothing you can do. But we will look ahead now to our third place game because I still want to try and get the best placement as possible. So let's try and shoot for third place in this league, and we will continue on with that. So Trevor Lawrence got the start last week. I think we are going to bench him as hot as he has been. I'm actually going to go the opposite side of that quarterback. We're going to go Bo Nix going up against Jacksonville Jaguars. According to ESPN, it's a plus matchup. The Jags ranked 23rd. Against opposing quarterbacks. I mean, Tyler Warren, that is a tough matchup for him. Actually, let's start George Kittle over Tyler Warren. And let's go ahead and start Amari Hampton. That's a plus matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. So Amari Hampton, if you do have him in your lineups, you are definitely starting him and not looking back. I know that Christian Watson is dealing with an injury. Alvin Kamara, probably not going to be likely to play in that one. I know the Seahawks do have a tough matchup, but, I'm just going to trust the best defense in fantasy football. So I don't really think I'm going to make too much drastic changes to the lineup. I think that we roll Bo Nix. I don't know about Emeka Egbuka, though. If I feel like if we did have another option like Brian Thomas, I just don't really trust in this option. I do trust Christian Watson, but I just don't know if he's going to play. Let's go ahead and look at the players who are available in this league. I'll go ahead and run down which players I think you should be picking up if you did miss out on some of your top waiver options. So let's go ahead and start with the quarterbacks that is available here in this league. So Jared Goff and Jordan Love would definitely be two top options quarterback-wise. Jared Goff against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jordan Love going up against the Bears. You can also start J.J. McCarthy against the Giants. Same with Aaron Rodgers against the Lions. They have some nice matchups, but out of all of those, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, and Jacoby Brissett would be my top 3 options for the week. Looking at the running backs, not really too many running backs this week. Blake Corum, he's really been consistently good. Michael Carter would definitely be a top option for me if you do need a running back this week. But really outside of that, not too many running backs I would go ahead and scoop up this week. Moving on to the wide receivers. You do have DJ Moore. Wouldn't touch him. Romeo Doubs, Troy Franklin, and Matthew Golden are some of your top options. Darius Slayton has a really tough matchup going up against the number 1 defense against opposing wide receivers. But Luther Burden has if he does play this week, has a nice matchup against the Green Bay Packers. I think we just roll with the guys that we have from last week, to be honest with you. But looking at the tight ends, you do have Harold Fannin, Dalton Schultz, Jawan Johnson available. Harold Fannin does have a tough matchup against the Bills, who've been number 1. Dalton Schultz, even as bad as the Raiders have been, they've been top 5 defense against the tight ends. So top tight ends, Colby Parkinson would definitely be my tight end 1 that I'm trying to pick up. Darren Waller, Brendan Strange as well. And as well as Jawan Johnson would be nice pickups this week. Looking at streaming defenses, number 1 defense would definitely be the Bills going up against the Cleveland Browns. I know the Bills defense haven't been that great that season. However, the matchup is really good. The Vikings against the Giants could also be another option. Same with the Saints against the Jets, as well as the Chiefs versus the Titans. I think that the Saints and the Chiefs are probably my top 2 streaming candidates. And just outside of that would be the Bills and the Vikings. So I think that's all for our recapping our team. I think that our roster heading in our starting lineup heading into this third place game will be Bo Nix will be our starting quarterback. Our 2 running backs, we're going to go with Saquon and Chase Brown. Receivers, we'll stay with JSN and Mike Ibuka. Feels like just our best options at that point. But if I do find later in the week that we do have a better option, the wide receiver over Mike Ibuka, will make that change. Starting tight end will be George Kittle. At the flex, we do have Marion Hampton in a nice matchup against the Cowboys, Seahawks defense, and Chase McLaughlin. So we are projected to get 123. Let's go ahead and see what Mushroom's team is rocking with to see if we are projected to take this one. I believe this is also a 2-week, part of this round number 2. So we will see what he's rocking with in week 16. There you go, week 16 and week 17. So we won't know the champion until next week. So, he has Patrick Mahomes in the IR. Drake London, we'll see if he plays or not. Looks like he is questionable right now. Honestly, his roster, he does have Vidal as his RB2, Bijan. So that's honestly not bad of a roster. He has Travis Kelce as his tight end, Wan'Dale Robinson as his flex. So honestly, he has a really good team. So this is going to definitely be a tough matchup. We'll see if he does, move out Patrick Mahomes. Looks like last week he didn't even bother to touch it. So hopefully this week he doesn't bother to touch either because I'm trying to get third place. But we are projected to win this week's matchup 123-100. Look at the championship match. It's going to be a close one, but I would definitely have to put my prediction for the Birds. The Birds is projected this week to win 139-123. So that's the overall look at your roster. So that's going to be it for our show tonight. We will be back next Wednesday. Oh, well, maybe not. Well, since we have Christmas Eve. So I'll probably do a Tuesday night show before we get into the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day festivities. So definitely keep an eye out on Tuesday night. For our Week 17 live show, we will go through our Week 17 starts and sits, as well as recap what happened in Week 16. So good luck to you in your next round of your fantasy football playoffs. And if you're in the championship, I know some leagues are already there. Good luck to you. Hopefully you're able to get the dub and win you some cash and bring that trophy home this season. So I hope you enjoyed this show. I appreciate everybody for dropping in their comments and dropping in to this weekly live show. Be sure to tune in to all of our fantasy football content and college football content that will be put out during the week. I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and I'll catch you all next time. So long for now.